Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Kierleis, and I am the university's Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance. I would like to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn Campus Construction Update. We have a full agenda for today's session where we will talk about Wheatley's HVAC and the university's air quality, campus construction projects, both those underway and those in design, the master plan update, and our Dorchester Bay City and calf pasture pump station projects. We've also been able to incorporate the university's new logo into today's presentation. I'd like to take a moment to congratulate Vice Chancellor for Marketing and Engagement, Martin Delage Sullivan, and her team on the unveiling of the new UMass Boston logo and a successful launch of the university's brand campaign. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of this work that's incorporated into today's presentation. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank all those who submitted questions or suggestions in advance of today's session. We've incorporated information on many of the more general topics and will note them as the presentation proceeds. For those who have more specific issues or concerns that are outside of the scope of today's session, follow-up will take place separately as needed. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have myself, and then Mike Kearns, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor for Facilities, Carl Erickson, the Director of Project Management for the university, and Zara Schneider-Graham, who's the Director of the Office of Environmental Health and Safety. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Zara for the next portion of our presentation.
Good afternoon. Just wanted to give folks an update on Wheatley Hall's HVAC and just talk a little bit about some key points on ventilation and filtration as they relate to the potential spread of virus particles in buildings. One of the things we've learned now, having lived through this COVID pandemic and what we know from public health, is that there's a consensus that multi-layered controls are the best way to reduce the possible transmission of COVID-19. And ventilation is really only one part of that multi-layer approach. So it's not just one mitigation strategy, but a combination. We've also seen that transmission of COVID-19 has been limited in settings when controls are present. So in classrooms and offices, we have controls present that limit any sort of transmission. And we've seen that this has been effective on campus because our rates of infection are lower compared to our surrounding community. And we've seen that trend in other colleges in the Northeast as well. So having good ventilation and filtration in indoor shared spaces is an important part of that multi-layer strategy. And that's really the ability of the space to not have virus particles transmitted if an infected person is in a room. So we know that ventilation and filtration will keep that spread at a minimum. We also are mitigating with non-ventilation controls, such as asking folks to stay home if they're sick, making sure people have vaccinations and boosters, doing surveillance testing, as well as symptomatic testing, and asking folks to be in quarantine or isolate if they've been exposed to an infected person. So good ventilation and filtration is a metric, but it's not the only metric to be considered when you're looking at risk. And it's not a uniform metric that can be applied to all spaces. What we do also know is that HVAC systems do not spread COVID. So evidence on our campus for having had people on campus for over a year show that there's been little or no transmission on campus. And this is also, there's also substantial evidence from other places across the US and the world that transmission has been limited in classroom settings. We have gotten some guidance from national experts from the CDC and from the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers about how to operate our HVAC systems during the pandemic. And these have all been implemented at UMass Boston. So we've brought in a third party, environmental health and engineering, to evaluate our HVAC systems to make sure they're in good working order. That was completed last year. And upgrades to the system have included putting in MERV 13 filters, which was also a recommendation. We've also increased the outdoor air ventilation as much as possible, and it's a balance between how much we can bring in, particularly during the summer months where we don't want to increase the humidity, or the winter months where we don't want to compromise thermal comfort. Also, the use of portable air filters are recommended in shared spaces that are occupied for extended times that don't meet the targets that have been set by these governing bodies. So the following industry standards are used to assess adequacy of ventilation in selected spaces at UMass Boston. Effective air changes per hour, EACH, is determined by looking at the sum of the outdoor air ventilation rate and the recirculated filtered air through the HVAC system. For classrooms, that EACH rate is 4 air changes per hour. In other shared spaces, like an office, they would be evaluated compared to an effective clean air exchange rate equivalent to the outdoor airflow rate in ASHRAE standard 62.1. So this is the industry standard to look at outdoor airflow rates. And so, for example, in a 100 square foot office, the effective air change rate that we would be looking at would be 1 air change per hour. So different than a classroom space where you have a much larger space with a lot more people. No ventilation interventions are used to address offices where there's a single occupant. HVAC systems in many buildings will meet the above air targets if MERV 13 filters are installed. So most mixed air HVAC systems serving classrooms and offices do meet effective air change rates with no intervention, as long as the air handling unit is working and providing ASHRAE 62.1 compliant ventilation, and that the filters have been upgraded to the MERV 13. For spaces that meet those targets, we don't use supplemental air cleaners, and they're not recommended by the governing bodies. We have brought in a consultant, as I mentioned, environmental health and engineering, who had inspected all of our air handling units, but we also had them do some testing in some classrooms in McCormick and Wheatley. And their testing of 7 classrooms in McCormick indicated that all the rooms but one met the recommended target of 4 air changes per hour. In Wheatley, separate airflow testing by both environmental health and engineering and the faculty staff union showed results were mixed and that some spaces didn't meet the targets. So based on those results, we have developed a testing plan to look at some of the spaces in these buildings that will be upcoming. And so we want to collect representative data from air handling unit zones on different floors in each of these buildings. Supply and return airflow measurements will be used to determine the effective air change rate per hour. And we're going to focus on classrooms and shared spaces. Initially, we'll probably test 2 to 3 spaces that are served by each AHU. And depending on the zone, different floors will have different numbers of spaces tested. So we're approximately 35 rooms in Wheatley will be tested, 30 rooms in Healy, and 35 rooms in McCormick. And then we'll take all those results and determine if we need to do additional testing to try and narrow the focus to areas that may not meet the recommended targets, or if we find that the majority of areas are meeting the targets, we can focus our efforts in different areas. We estimate that this testing will take 1 to 3 weeks, depending on access, and we'll probably not start this till the end of the semester so that we're not trying to compete with classes that are on campus. Finally, just wanted to say a little bit about CO2 levels because there's been some discussion about that on campus. CO2 measurements are one way to assess the outdoor air ventilation rate in spaces And we know that people exhale CO2 and that outdoor air ventilation removes CO2 at known rates. Expected CO2 levels in occupied classrooms that meet code ventilation requirements are 1,000 to 1,800 ppm. CO2 levels in buildings are not hazardous, but higher CO2 levels can be associated with decreased perceptions of IAQ. So think about stale air. If the air is not moving and it's just sitting, then you can get a perception that the air quality is bad, but it's not. It's not a sign of a hazardous condition. In the context of COVID ventilation, CO2 readings are not as useful and they're limited in many spaces because the filters that we're putting in to combat the COVID virus particles are actually not filtering out CO2. So that means you can have a higher CO2 level in a space that still meets the CDC and ASHRAE ventilation guidance. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of info. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Kearns.
Thank you, Zara, and thank you everyone for attending this information session. Good afternoon. Based on what we've learned and the guidance that we've been following from the CDC and ASHRAE, we've developed some short, medium, and long-term plans for primarily Healy, but also focusing on, primarily Wheatley, but also focus on McCormick and Healy. Short-term, which means immediate and ongoing day-to-day right now. Facilities addresses issues as they come up, which could be selective balancing, fixing broken controls, wiring sensors, thermostats, things of that nature. And we're also participating with the Office of Environmental Health and Safety with additional air testing in Wheatley, McCormick, and Healy. We have deployed 15 HEPA air filtration units based on the readings from the faculty staff union and from our outside expert EH&E. We've deployed 15 units to the classrooms with the lowest air changes per hour, help to boost the airflow in those rooms. We also have ordered, and this update as of today, 30 more of these units are already received. They're in hand in our warehouse, ready for deployment to other troubled areas that we may find. And we're also working with Zara's group to create a process to assess areas or spaces that come up as concerns or requests that for a HEPA air filtration unit. We'll need a process to evaluate and approve or decide if we need to put a unit in that space. Midterm plans, 3 months to 1 year. We've commissioned a retro commissioning study for both Wheatley and McCormick. We're going to focus on Wheatley first and then move over to McCormick. It's basically a health check of the building's HVAC system. We bid it out and it's been awarded. We kicked off with the engineers this initiative last week. The study for Wheatley will take approximately 10 weeks. It will basically assess the HVAC system, identify specifically for us what might need to be recalibrated, repaired, rebalanced, controls repairs, or other items that need to be fixed or addressed. Once this report or study is finished, it will give us a targeted list of items to go after that will help us improve the functioning of the HVAC systems in Wheatley. Some of the items will be short-term, easy fixes, we hope. Some will take a longer time to address and fix. The goal obviously is to ultimately produce a better functioning system, HVAC-wise, for Wheatley. And then once we finish the study at Wheatley, we'll move over to McCormick and do the same thing. Longer term, we have a number of things happening as part of the capital planning process for UMass Boston. We've put in a request for a project to replace air handlers. They're called H&C 1 and 6 in Wheatley. H&C 1 and 6 are the two air handlers that provide the air for the classrooms on the first and second floors. So we would rebuild those or replace those in their current spots where they sit in the building. And we would also confirm and fix any issues downstream through the ductwork and controls and whatever else may not be working in the classrooms. Longer term, at the state level, we've put in a request. Last year, we put a very thorough proposal, lengthy proposal to DCAM, state funding agency for a lot of projects in the UMass system or in the state systems, for $15 million to fully renovate Wheatley's first and second floors, which would do a lot of things for Wheatley. It would right size the classrooms, upgrade the HVAC, lighting, electrical, and technology systems. We would build more modern collaboration and teaming spaces, and we would also rebuild the vestibule. It needs renewal. It's original, 50 years old, and by rebuilding it, it'll be modern and new, and it will also conserve energy by reducing air infiltration through the two entrances. As always, any air quality concerns, you can contact the Office of Environmental Health and Safety. I think all of you know the email and the phone number. It's all on their website. For any airflow concerns regarding low air, too much air, hot, cold calls, those type of things should come to facilities at our email address. And here is our phone number, also on our website. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Carl to give us an update on many of the construction projects going on campus. Carl.
Thank you, Mike. As you noted, I will provide an overview of campus construction, focusing on the substructure demolition, quadrangle development project, or SDQD, deferred maintenance projects, and other construction projects. And at the end, Mike Kearns will come back and provide an update on the fire protection improvements at the central utility plant. Questions received, as Kathleen noted, are incorporated into this presentation, most of them focused around the substructure project. By way of background, the SDQD project is the last major element of the 2009 campus master plan. It addresses inherent long-term problems associated with the original design and construction. It extends the useful life of remaining buildings and will provide a new center or quad to the campus, as well as create opportunities for future growth. Key elements of the project include demolition of the Science Center, pool building, and major portions of the plaza. This work is complete. Repairs to the substructure beneath McCormick and Wheatley, extending the useful life of these buildings. Restoration of the remaining plaza and new waterproofing and drainage. New stair and elevator access to Healy Library from the plaza. New central quad with outdoor program space and a 300 space parking lot. With respect to substructure stabilization, this effort included concrete repairs, selective steel reinforcing and lateral bracing, and installation of protected pathways. This work is complete. Other activities, Healy elevator and stair construction is progressing. The shaft walls and partitions for the elevator are underway. Steel cross beams to receive the stairs are set. The stairs and elevator are scheduled to be in use by November 2022. This is tied to the completion of the portion of the plaza in this area. I'll note this again later in the presentation. This summer we'll have increased construction activities on the plaza and quad. Campus population is reduced, but UMass Boston is still an active campus. Work will require shifts in the current protected pathways as construction progresses. Throughout the construction, access across the plaza will be maintained. Egress paths are reviewed and coordinated with the Office of Environmental Health and Safety and reviewed continuously. Of note for this summer is the work at the McCormick entrance. This will need to be closed to complete improvements as part of the SDQD project. Walkway will be shifted to provide an access to the east entrances, and this entrance will be reopened for the fall return of campus in fall of 2022. In the quad, work will transition from the structural void along the plaza to building up of the landform. This will be done in a series of infills using the former Science Center, which was crushed and is stored in Lot D in the south lot. Infill will progress from the corner of Quinn and Healy outward towards the campus center and Beacons Walk. Next, a recap of the milestones to completion. By the fall of 2022, the McCormick entrance will be completed and returned for campus use. Plaza surfaces, with the exception of the section in front of Healy and a portion adjacent to the campus center, will remain under construction. By November of 2022, these areas are scheduled to be completed and available for campus use. The area in front of Healy was needed to maintain access over the summer, and that's why that portion is completed after by November of 2022. With respect to the quad will remain a construction zone separated from the plaza. The quad will be shaped binder or base course asphalt placed for the basketball court and parking lot by December of 2022. The plantings are constrained by winter conditions and will resume in the spring, along with the balance of walkways, site furnishings, and final paving, wrapping up by July of 2023. Seeded lawn areas do require a growing season to establish their roots before use. And so that will follow after the July 2023 completion. While still a year away, it is important to be reminded of the uses that the quad will open up, from recreation and picnic areas to larger gatherings for movies or campus events. There will be many central uses in the new quad. And just another look at the project completion. There's also a rendering video on Marketing and Engagement's website, and you can see a walkthrough of the completed project. Other construction is focused on deferred or critical repair maintenance. Portions of this work are funded by the state or DCAM. 15 million is completed or underway, which includes 8.4 million funded by the state. An additional 1.7 million provided by the state was used through their small repairs program. Facilities also has new house doctor contracts for architectural and engineering consultants have been engaged, and this is supporting the effort to reduce our overall deferred maintenance backlog. Projects in design or to start construction shortly include refurbishment of both air handling units in Wheatley. This project is to be advertised for award in May with work done later this year. Concrete repairs and replacement of garage doors at the service and supply loading docks is in the final design, and replacement of the McCormick hot water tanks is in design. These projects have approved studies with DCAM and are moving forward. In addition, utility submeters to reduce energy use is designed and scheduled for advertisement in May, and upgrade of building campus controls to improve operations is in the study phase to be advanced over the remainder of this year. Other projects include roof replacements. Phase 2 of McCormick is planned for spring of 2023, and in a Wheatley roof extension over the plaza is in design. Other exterior projects underway include comprehensive study of the building facades and exterior doors for replacement, restoration of the harbor walk, including pavilion stairs and the ADA ramp and pathway lighting is wrapping up permitting with the Conservation Commission and will be advertised for public bids. This work will be done in phases to limit disruption and keep the pathway open for public use during construction. Other projects for facilities come through the Space Committee, which is responsible for review and approval of space allocations, utilizations, and use changes. Example of recent projects include work in Quinn, ISC, Wheatley, and Campus Center, and I'll go through a few of those. In the Quinn, renovations to the lower level entrance of Quinn and additional partition walls were added. In the upper Quinn third floor, office cubicles were added to support a relocation of staff. Work in the IAC to support new research equipment included upgrades of electrical feeds and ventilation improvements, as well as balancing of systems to account for the new research equipment in the overall building. Other projects included new benches outside of the ballroom and the campus center. These both add seating while waiting outside the ballroom and provide protection to the radiators in this area. In Wheatley, upgrades to a common shared conference space were completed, as shown in these pictures. At this point, I'll turn the presentation back to Mike Kearns to discuss fire protection improvements at the central utility plant.
Thank you, Kyle. Obviously a lot going on construction wise. Good job. Most of you, I think, remember, but if you don't, last Memorial Day around 10:20 in the morning, we had a high pressure fire main pipe, 12-inch pipe burst, flooding the central utility plant, which shut down the campus for a little more than a week, emergency situation. We stopped, obviously we pumped out the central plant, cleaned it up, got campus back up and running, got the buildings back online. But the fire protection system didn't have ways to isolate failures. So in December of 2021, we did a campus-wide shutdown when the campus was virtually empty, and we added valves and piping loops to allow for isolation. So that if we do have a failure or if we need a fire protection shutdown, we don't have to shut down the whole campus anymore. We can do it in smaller sections of the campus, which will be less disruptive to everybody. We also fixed some small leaks that we had in the system at that time. This upcoming spring and into the summer, we have a couple of more phases of the recovery of this initiative. The pipe that failed has been offline since last May. So we re-engineered that pipe and have a design now that is more resilient and much lower risk for a burst or a failure in the future. So you may be asking, well, what have we been running on? There's a second pipe that we've been running on. It's a redundant system, meaning there's two pipe feeds independent of each other. That second pipe is the same construction as the original pipe. So after we fix the first pipe that did fail last May, we'll put the system back onto that pipe, that line, take the second pipe offline, rebuild that to the more resilient, more rigid, stronger sprinkler main pipe, so that we've reduced the risk of failure significantly once we complete those two phases. That'll be the last major phase of the recovery of this unfortunate issue. I'm going to pinch hit now a little bit for our director of campus planning, Dennis Swinford, who's on vacation this week. Give a little update on where we are with the campus master plan and a few other things. Some of you may have seen the slide in our previous presentations, but we're moving from phase A to phase B. The campus planning department and outside consultants have been working hard from November through now in the discovery and analyze phase of the campus master plan, gathering information, doing campus tours with the consultants so they can learn our campus, doing facility condition assessments, physical and usage, and space analysis. So we are kind of at the cusp of moving from A to B. We're in the explore phase, March through June of this year, analyzing the data that they've collected, master planning, programming, planning principles, concepts, and coming up with scenarios for our future campus 10-year master plan. After that phase, we will move into the final phase, which is reporting out and taking action on the master plan. So this is really the transition point. The darker orange arrows are the discovery and analysis progress, the things I mentioned a minute ago, site observations, existing conditions assessments, space adequacy assessments, classroom assessment, and a facility audit. We heard a lot from stakeholders. Thank you for your participation in the surveys and the interviews that were held by the Department of Planning. And we are now analyzing all that data, moving on to the Explore. Wanted to remind everybody, if you had not heard, a campus-wide announcement, community-wide announcement went out a few weeks ago. There are 2 open sessions coming up, more information gathering for the campus master plan. They'll both be in the campus center on May 10th and May 11th. Encourage everybody or anybody that has interest to go visit with our planners, Dennis and Tina, and with the consultants to provide your opinions and your thoughts on the campus. Other things that we're working on at the state and the federal level. I already mentioned the DCAM Wheatley Hall proposal, $15 million to renovate Wheatley, first and second floor. I won't go through the scope again, but to set expectations properly, it is a very competitive process. Any and all state facilities can apply for the money that DCAM awards out. So we feel that we've presented a very strong case, very strong proposal, and we're fingers crossed hoping that we succeed, but it is very competitive with numerous other agencies applying for the same money. At the federal level, from the COVID pandemic, the government recognized a shortage of healthcare professionals. So we were approached, or an opportunity presented itself for an initial award of 1.35 million to start some design programming and conceptual design for an expanded nursing program, which would potentially be a new building for the Manning College of Nursing and Health Sciences. We did win that that tranche of money, so we are now finishing the grant application to receive that money, start the procurement of a design team, and start that work. Currently, at this point in time, there are two other opportunities where we are going to apply for another $2 million in additional design money to carry the design forward for the potential future building. And there's another $5 million available that has a deadline of implementation by end of fiscal year 23. So working with MCNHS, the concept of a home healthcare training lab to be built on campus was developed, and we're going to apply for the $5 million for that, which would be a space, but a lot of equipment to replicate home healthcare, nursing, and healthcare professional training that our students can benefit from. And then when a building is built in the future, we could relocate this lab into a potential future new building. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. So thank you for that. And thank you for the opportunity to update you. I'll turn the presentation over to Kathleen at this point.
Thank you, Mike. The last two items for today's session relate to two projects that the university is working on with outside partners. So the first is Dorchester Bay City. For context, this is a 6 million square foot project that's being developed by Accordia Partners on land that's ground lease from the UMass Building Authority, known as UMBA. Approximately half of the square footage is in the parcel of land that is currently our Bayside parking lot, and the other half is at 2 Morrissey Boulevard, where the Santander Bank is. The Boston Planning and Development Agency is overseeing the permitting process for this and has asked Accordia to plan both of these parcels concurrently as part of an overall project. As shown on the next slides, Accordia have included many facets for this project. Is designed. They've been discussing this as part of the permitting of the project over the last several months. And that conversation is still ongoing. So they've unveiled different portions of the project, as well as on the next slide, previewing what potentially this development could look like. Moving on, for the campus, as we talked about in previous sessions, this is a monetary transaction for us here at UMass Boston. Back in February 2019, the Board of Trustees did approve a 99 lease agreement for the Bayside property with Accordia. It would bring to the university a minimum payment of $192.5 million up to a maximum of $235 million, which would be due at the time that the project is successfully permitted, depending on the square footage that has been approved. This project is subject to the City of Boston Article 80 permitting process. So that brings it under the purview of Boston Planning and Development, and Accordia has been working through that process for the last several months. Where they stand in the process is that the second public comment phase ended on March 25th. So now the city has taken into consideration all the public comments and input that they received on the project, and they will be incorporating that into recommendations that they will release to Accordia for areas of the proposal that will require further study. They have announced that the project will be still under review and that there will be a third public comment phase that will take place. So as we move forward to the third public phase, there will be additional information made available as it becomes known, and as has been done in the previous two phases. At each step in the process, the campus community will be informed about when the public meetings will be held so that everyone can have their voice heard and can learn more about the project through the process. Also, still we're being worked on is University Crossing, otherwise known as the Calf Pasture Pump Station to all of us here on campus. This project would comprise of the Calf Pasture Pump Station building itself, as well as some of the adjoining parcels near the building. So this also is designed to be taken forward as a public-private partnership. There's been a committee that was formed on campus to help advise the UMass Building Authority, who is spearheading this development, on the campus's priorities and to solicit ideas from the community, and have provided these principles to UMBA. As we see here, the project is the building itself, which is in the lower right yellow box here in the corner, as well as lot D, which is the upper box shown on the picture here. This is approximately 6 acres of space on the on the point. So the campus's design principles, these are items that we've seen and talked about over the past several months, but just as sort of a refresher, things that the university has indicated to the building authority about what we would like to see regarding the design, or that we want to connect this and integrate it, any kind of private use, to our academic programs. We want the development to be academic and researcher and learner focused, to be able to improve the quality of campus life on the point, engage our neighbors, advance accessibility and inclusion, and also be profitable, viable, and sustainable. We've also provided some physical form guidance regarding how we want to have the space connect spaces and be able to connect the functioning of campus life. We want to embody exemplary environmental sustainability and climate readiness, create a handsome welcome entry to the campus, link our open spaces to our larger the bay, highlight the iconic architecture of the pumping station, and also support accessibility and inclusion. So this project, these design principles, this material is being incorporated into the RFP for the project. UMass Building Authority is also using information that's going to come out of our campus master plan update to help further craft the RFP. So as the campus master plan update project progresses over the next several months, the time frame for the RFP will be further developed with WUMBA to be then able to proceed with this project so that it's coordinated with the overall planning that the university is taking. So as that develops, there'll be more information forthcoming about the time frame. We look forward to having more information for the campus community on that over the next few months. So I think that pretty much covers a lot of topics for today. There's been a lot of activity going on during the past year. If there's questions that are raised as a result of this presentation, questions, comments that anyone from our campus who's seeing this presentation would like to bring up, please email masterplanning@umb.edu. Take a look at those and get back to you. And as always, if there are construction related issues, please don't hesitate to contact Facility Service Response. They're here to help address any kind of issues or concerns that come up from any members of the campus community related to the construction here on campus. So we hope that this provided everyone with a broad overview of a lot of the activity that's going on related to our air quality as well as our construction here on campus. And we look forward to our next presentation hopefully being in person. So we'll look forward to getting back to that, and best wishes to all for a successful conclusion to this semester.